innovations. Many know him from his influential tenure at Royal Philips, where, as Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer, he led the company's transition into a modern, customer centric digital health technology powerhouse. Here in India, his entrepreneurial legacy stands even stronger. As the co-founder of Emphasis, he helped build one of the India's most successful and globally respected IT and BPO enterprises, a testament to his deep understanding of technology and scale. Long before, when digital banking became everyday reality, he helped create one of the world's earliest internet banking and payments platform at Citigroup's Technology Lab. His pioneering work has earned him global recognition, including Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award and the NASSCOM Global CIO Award. Sir, we are immensely grateful to you for taking out the time out of your demanding schedule amid extensive travels and your commitment to global innovation to be with us today and share your invaluable insights on the powerful intersection of technology, creativity, leadership, perspectives that will help us as future leaders to navigate a world driven by innovation and data. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tas. Yes, sir. So you need a hand mic?
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not going to stand.
Yeah. This is the controller.
Yeah.
And I will be presenting the slides. So would you prefer color mic? Yeah, color mic.
No, this. Yeah, if you have the color mic, it's.
Yes, sure, sir. Sure. Get me the color mic. Color mic.
Okay. Can you hear me well? Okay. Thank you. Well, it's an honor and a pleasure, not only because I have a lot of my former colleagues here, but especially because I got to address you, the next generation of leaders. And I think there's no bigger contribution than you can give to share your experience and your all the things the expertise you build up with the next generation. And actually, this morning somebody asked me what are the characteristics of a great leader, and I heard a couple of them passing. So one of them, all the great leaders have great analytical skills. So all of them know how to interpret data, look at things, look at trends, find deviations, and basically understand what's behind the data. That's one. Every great leader I met. The second characteristic of a great leader is being able to get things done, to stand your ground, and to actually deliver. These two are a necessary condition. Without these, forget it. You're not going to get a career. But there's more. And one of them we talked about earlier. It's curiosity. Being able to dream about what it could be, to interpret what can be. So, and the last one is probably most important, which I also heard. We're all people. It's about empathy. It's about understanding the people you work with, being in their shoes, but also with your customers, with your partners, with the users of your products and services. So I thought I start with that because it's typically a question I get. And I said, what I'm going to do is actually go behind the observations the previous speakers did. So there's the hype cycle. Why is there a hype cycle? You know, you said that 70% of the digital transformations fail. Why? Why? Why did it take people 25 years to get a decent digital presence? You know, all this stuff started in 95. You know, the first exposure I got to the internet was when I was at Citibank, and together with Jerry Rao, developed the first internet banking. And you know what people told me at that time? They told me, wonderful technology, but nobody is ever going to do their banking on the internet. Nobody. You just got UPI here, the biggest, you know, government-supported infrastructure in the world to support payments. So we've come a long way, but not in every industry. So why is it that things actually change so slowly? And do you know where I borrowed this title, Changing Fast and Slow? Does somebody know? Nobody has a clue? Yeah, Thinking Fast and Slow. Why is that an important book? Because it explains how we as humans make decisions. And it talks about our biases. We're very biased. You know, all of us, we have 40 odd biases that people have found. And it's a fast brain. Our fast brain allows us to sense what's going on and make split-second decisions. And most of us rely heavily on our fast brain. But we also, God gave us a slow brain. And what's the slow brain? It allows us to step back, to apply logic and reason, to make sense of what you sense. And it allows us to learn, because you were not born knowing what 4 plus 4 is. You know, you just spit it out. So it has become part of your slow brain, fast brain. Now, when I look at AI, I see the same. We're now using a fast AI. It can give you answers in a split second. It can basically orchestrate the world's knowledge. You know, everything that ever been documented is part of the input to an LLM. It's a statistical machine that works very, very fast and very effective. And it creates insights and patterns that we didn't see before because it uses so much data. And while we can maybe handle 7 variables, it can handle billions. But it still lacks the slow AI. Now, we're working on it. AI cannot reason. It is a probabilistic machine. But we're starting to apply reason. We're starting to apply guardrails. And yes, we have supervised learning. And maybe we apply biases to supervised learning, but if we do it over very large numbers, that will get evened out. But the slow AI is going to be more important than the fast AI. And the ones who understand that will ultimately be the winner. But the same applies to an organization. An organization has fast layers and slow layers as well, and that's what we're going to talk about. But first, I'm going to make a number of observations. Okay, if you turn it on, it works better, apparently. This is an observation I didn't make, but I think it's very profound. So we're not in an era of change, we're in a change of eras, and we've seen it. And of course, it started with the internet that allowed us to get connected in completely different ways at a completely different scale. Then we got social media and algorithmic feeds into your media that changed the way we actually talk to each other, the way politics is done these days. And it is one of the causes that we living in a polarized world, because these algorithms tell us that it's more interesting to talk about extreme position than a moderate position. So all these things are super influential. And the complexity, because of the connections, the dynamics, the complexity, the speed at which things are changing, tells us that we will be a completely different species in just a matter of years. So you will be different. I will be different. And if you live in this very complex dynamic world, which is quite different from how I grew up, but you grew up already in the first stage of that world, the observation is that actually you cannot control a complex dynamic system. You're personally a complex dynamic system. You actually have billions of entities in your stomach that have their own DNA and their own goals in life. You interact in the environment. You can influence what you're learning. You can influence your health, but you cannot control it. So you have to learn to influence. But I grew up, and when I studied when I was sitting there, everything was about control. Is how do you control your organization? How do you control the supply chain? How do you control your channels? How do you lock in your assets? And that's a different world than we're living in. Now, you can study complex systems. So MIT has spent quite some resources and effort in really understanding how do dynamic systems work. And all of them have layers. And every complex system that perpetuates has stabilizing layers and layers that constantly innovate and sense and change and adapt. So the whole trick is about finding balance. And you can apply it to your own life, finding balance. Are you living the fast life? Are you on TikTok, responding? Or do you take time to think, to reflect, to set a direction for your own future? How much time do you spend on that? If I ask leaders, how much time do you spend in the fast and how much in the slow? They say, oh, well, I have no time for slow. Too much pressure, too many things going on. So then you have a structural problem. So we look at an organization also as a layers. You know, every ecosystem has layers. You can look at a forest. You can go outside Bangalore, find a forest. It may be thousands of years old. It has a complex ecosystem where actually everything communicates. And it doesn't communicate like we do. It communicates through biochemical messaging. And even trees communicate. And a tree is a good symbol because every year a tree loses its leaves, it flowers, you know, the branches will grow, but the trunk may be there for 200, 300 years. But what's the most important thing for a tree to survive? Its roots. That's where it gets its stability, its nutrition. Now, interestingly, fungal networks may find out this tree needs this type of nutrition, and another tree has it in surplus. It will communicate, and actually the nutrients will flow. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because there's more collaboration in nature than there is competition. But in our minds, we still believe it's all about competition. It's about market share. It's about the best contract with your supplier and how do you optimize the fees and the rates you can get with your customer. And I'm going to tell you it's not about that. So there's a lot of things you may have learned, definitely a lot of what I learned that I don't believe it's still important, but not that important. So in the operational layer, we'll sense, we respond, we constantly want to improve processes, we want to improve our customer relationships. We all do that. We do it naturally almost. But then there's a layer that will shape it for you. So it will say, this is our mission, this is our vision, this is our strategy, these are our systems, these are our rules, these are our KPIs, these are our processes. And then you have to ask your question, the question as a leader or as somebody who builds a venture, because I'm equally spending time with corporates and ventures, is how flexible is my strategic layer? Will I adapt with the possibilities that the technology offers me? Will I adapt in this layer with the opportunity that my ecosystem grants me? And I think a lot of companies are out of sync there. There's a reason why it's hard to change. Because people and systems resist change. There's even a deeper layer that makes it much more difficult. And I also heard the panel talk about it. It's the stuff in our heads, the mindset. And I think that's the foundation of every company. Why? Why do you exist? What is your purpose? What is the core capability that you're going to build your organization on? What are your moral values? Where do you draw the line? How much risk are you willing to take? And I found out that a lot of companies talk about, oh, we need to make a big step, we need to take risk. And then you find out that they don't do it. Why is that? Because their belief is not deep enough. Okay, there's another book. Did you read it? The Innovator's Dilemma. Anybody read it? Should be mandatory reading any management curriculum. It's on the same level as Thinking Fast and Slow. A rational leader will always choose to tweak what they have. Because in the short term, the return on investment in a slight product improvement or a supply chain improvement will generate a better return than trying something that is unknown. If you're running BMW and you're creating the best combustion engines and the best cars, you will always create another feature. You're not going to jump to electrical vehicles. It's too much of a risk. So it's logical and rational to keep doing what you're doing and doing it better. But over the long term, it's no longer rational because you may be disrupted. Germany made the best cars. Volkswagen has been in business for over 100 years. I'll come back to that. So, there are 5 big shifts. 5 big shifts that you as students should think about now, because they're going to determine your role in the near future. So the first one is the most important one. It's in your head. Is your mindset one of scarcity and a belief in zero sum? Zero sum means what I take from you, I win and you lose. So if you are head of procurement and you think your goal is to optimize the rates that you get from a supplier, you're a zero sum player. Most procurement departments work like that. If you believe that you create longer term relationship and it's all about the value and the mutual value exchange, you're in a different mindset. So, I grew up in the 60s in the Netherlands. And we had only 2 television channels. And I talked to my Indian friends and they said, wow, you were lucky. We had only 1 channel and no TVs. You couldn't travel in the 60s abroad. There was no foreign currency. You only had two types of cars, and it would take 10 years to get one. If you want to do a transaction, you had to stand in line for a day at the State Bank of India. That was India. But that's completely gone. You go to a chai vendor, scan your QR code, and you pay. We're living in a world of abundance. And the biggest abundance happened 3 years ago. The biggest abundance ever. And that's what you guys talked about. And of course it's hyped, and of course there is a hype cycle. But there's something fundamentally different about this technology. It's cognitive technology. It constantly learns. Now, the scary part of it, that if you ask Sam Altman, can you predict the outcome of this prompt that I enter? He will say no. I have no idea. So the scary part is that we're not dealing with a BMW machine that operates according to the spec. We're dealing with a technology where you cannot predict the outcome. That's scary stuff, but it's also very exciting because I assume all of you use ChatGPT or its equivalent, and you've all experienced what you get out of it. And every day, I'm amazed, every day. But I think you probably talked about it, 95% of all the AI projects don't have an ROI. Why? Because they're only in the surface. They don't take this message 2 layers down. The message that what's going to happen is value creation will be reinvented. It will not be 3 features more, or I add this service line to my IT services portfolio. That's not going to make the difference at all. It's going to be about understanding that human needs are infinite and the opportunities for us to address them are endless. So you guys don't have a scarcity problem that you need to solve. And when I went to university, economics was the allocation of scarce resources. I tell you, economics now is the orchestration of abundant resources. It's 180 degrees change. When I went to school, I was one of the first to graduate in computer science. The way we would do it is we would analyze a process, then we would codify that process. We would look at the inputs, the outputs, and then we would determine the data structures. So data was secondary to process. I tell you, 180 degrees different. You start with the data, and I tell you, all the data resources you have today are only a fraction of what you can get tomorrow. So you will have all this data, an abundance problem. How do you orchestrate that data? How do you analyze that data? How do you get the insights that may trigger a process? I'm very active in healthcare because I think it's completely outdated. Financial services moved ahead, healthcare is 20 years behind. The data is not a blood test. The data is not an MRI or an image. The data is all of it combined with the stuff I get from my ring, from my watch, the way I interact with others, the way I sleep, the way I exercise. And that data can tell me what to watch for. And it can trigger my doctor even, because my watch may tell you, oh, you have arrhythmia, so your heart rate is not stable. And that happened a couple of times. It will tell me, go to a doctor, get a deeper analysis, and then use technology to find out what's the best treatment for me. So the answer is in the data. If you have a challenge in your organization, I bet you the answer is in the data. So there is this abundance, and you have to see it. So that's why we need the dreamer. We need the people that are curious, people that go out and explore. We're back into the time of the great explorers. That's an opportunity. And it's not learning the process very well, because the process will be irrelevant. It's all about understanding user needs, human needs. Experiment, and then figure out something that clicks, and then scale it very fast. This on the left is Volkswagen. 21,000 contracts with suppliers. Each contract determines quality, price, and functionality. And of course, delivery times. So that machine, pretty well organized. But now somebody comes along and tells you, there's this great new technology. It's an EV. It has 100 times less components. And is actually quite modular. And you know what? Anybody can buy it. And you need a battery, but you also need a whole lot of software. And then I'll say, well, yeah, very interesting, but our customers like the sound of the combustion engine. They like to shift gears. You know what's that? That's the existential layer talking. It's fear. It's don't know what to do. Then, of course, our friend Elon Musk showed the way with Tesla. But then the Chinese were even smarter than that. They said, okay, Elon Musk can think he can do it all on his own and get $1 trillion paycheck. I think it's a waste of money, I bet you. Because the Chinese said, we're going to do the stuff on the right. We're going to create an ecosystem. If you want a battery, any type of battery. You want self-driving software, you get self-driving software. So here's this company you all know, Xiaomi. You probably know it from their phones. They decided to become a car company. It took them 2 years to build a car. Then they decided we launch it online. So they launched it online. They sold 50,000 cars in 1 hour. Not 100 years. It took them 2 years. Selling 50,000 cars didn't take a year. It took 1 month. Without dealerships, without anything. This is happening in a lot of industries. So the linear model with all these contracts is moving to a model where value is way more fluid, where people find their slot in the ecosystem, and where things become modular. But that requires another business model. And the business model that's going to win is the business model that really understands the user's needs. And not now, over time. And of course, you all know the companies that are really good at it. Apple. You think that, everybody thinks Steve Jobs was brilliant. I also think he was brilliant, but probably in a different way than you think. But even Steve Jobs could not have imagined the 2 million apps on the iPhone. And the brilliance is not in the 2 million apps. The brilliance is in creating the platform that allows 2 million, smart people, companies, to present themselves with something that they believe addresses user needs on a platform that's secure and that will be instantly distributed around the globe. Now, this picture is not Apple. This picture is a 130-year-old company. It's John Deere. And they asked themselves, so I met them for the first time more than that, 12 years ago. And they told me that, we used to be heavy equipped machinery, heavy agricultural equipment, tractors, etc. company. But we're not. Yes, we still build amazing hardware, but we're a company that helps our customers optimize agricultural yields. So they lifted the needs to another level. So you can say, okay, I'm a heavy machinery, I compare myself to my competitor, they have 3 features more, let's find the 3 features and try to beat my competitor. They said, forget about our competitor. Let's totally focus on our customers. Let's look at what our customers really need. And do you think a hospital needs an MRI? Yes, of course they need an MRI, but what they really need is advanced diagnostic capability. And that's not just coming from the MRI. And the way healthcare should be done is not by process, pathways, protocols. It should be done based on data. What do you need now? What are the trends? When should we intervene? What will be the best therapy that fits with you personally? And that's not a process. Now, healthcare is not there yet, but the opportunity is there. The data is there. So I think this applies to every industry. The data is there. The opportunity is there. Why are you guys still organized the old way? And the reason is that the way the organization works has never adapted, because you have these layers that hold you back. So, but then I said earlier, listen, it's a complex system, so you cannot control it. Then what can you do? You can influence it. And you have 5 levers. 5 levers. First, you can set the direction. You can say, okay, we have an annual plan and we have quarterly results, and we entirely focus on that. The plan is sacrosanct, and just everybody needs to follow the plan. And if you deviate, we'll beat you. You will go and work harder, get more customers, improve your process, better terms with your suppliers. That's what usually happens. Things start getting tough, just beat them harder. Just put more urgency. But urgency is not sustainable. So your direction needs to adjust to the speed of the opportunity and the ecosystem. Therefore, you should build in flexibility. The way you create value is going to change. If you're running an IT services company, what are you going to do? Are you still going to do time and material when Claude can write half of your code? What are you going to do? You have to change the way you create value. And therefore your systems have to change, your processes have, your KPIs have to change. But that's hard. When I was at Philips, we had all these business units. We had an ultrasound business unit, we had patient monitoring, and everybody tried to optimize their unit. And it was all a feature fight. Oh, GE is doing this. Siemens is doing that. We should be doing this. I said, no. Because that's not the way to win. The way to win is to lift the proposition. And then the future of imaging is going to be AI, period. AI is going to determine diagnostics in the future. That's a given. So get ready, play with it. Find partners that can do it with you. And you don't need to write all these algorithms yourself, Philips. Because a lot of our customers are actually doing this because they're university medical centers. And these PhDs love to write algorithms, but they have no clue how to commercialize, how to integrate it, how to turn it into a proposition. That's where we can come in. Now, you think that was easy? You think that everybody jumped up and said, oh yes, that's what we're going to do, great. Let's change all our KPIs, let's train the sales. No, resistance, deep resistance. I said, okay, remember telecoms? It changed from hardware to software-defined telco. I said, listen, we're even going to skip that phase. We're going to do AI-defined imaging. People were ready to kill me because they're all mechanical engineers. They said, look at this machine, it's a beautiful big machine, look at the magnet. I said, yeah, it's great, and it's a beautiful machine, but this stuff is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's about the next layer of needs you can fulfill. But how do you do that? How do you create a solution that says I can take data from the MRI, from the ultrasound, from the patient monitors, I can take it from the medical record system, I can combine that and turn that into a deep insight. How do you do that? Not by telling MRI you have to do that, ultrasound. You have to reorganize. You have to create multidisciplinary teams. You have to give them challenges. You have to give them an architecture to put that in. And you give them the guardrails, but you don't tell them what to do. You don't tell them what to do. You give them a challenge. Because you're all smart, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here. Smart people, you don't tell what to do, especially if you want to innovate. You give them a challenge. And I bet you, all of you will run faster when you get a challenge. If I tell you, you have to do this, I was once touring through India, and the guide told me, sir, you have to do this and this. And my wife said, you never tell my husband what to do. You give him a challenge. Look at him running. And it's for most people that are smart. But how do you motivate people? You all know open source. So I once asked my colleague at the executive committee of Philips, what do you know about open source? Yeah, I've heard of it. I said, how many people do you think participate in this actively every day? Oh, maybe 10,000 people. I said, no, it's in the millions. And I said, they don't get paid for it. I said, no. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I said, that's because you're not an engineer. You don't understand the engineer mindset. Because what does an engineer want? They want to create. That's why they became engineers. They want to understand things. And they want to build stuff they believe in. And you know what? They prefer to do it with people they respect. And that's typically not their manager. So that's why people dedicate their time to that. And I found out at Philips, we had a rock star open source developer. And by accident, I found out about it. And the guy was like a hero in the community. Everybody wanted to have his feedback on the code. And then I find out he's like 6 levels down from me, tucked in some corner in Brazil. So I said, okay, this is what's wrong about the organization. So we have these people with talent, potential, and we just, push them in a box. And they cannot develop themselves. They cannot come up with ideas. We don't let them experiment. You know how many experiments, let's Booking.com, Dutch company. Every day they do 2,000, 3,000 experiments. They constantly find out what's going on. So my son is kind of my mentor because he was head of strategy and business operations for Notion when they grew from 10 million to 100 million users. He's now running a SaaS company, and amongst others, they have software for restaurants to run restaurants. So my son told me, he said, you know what I did? Because we have very, very granular data. So I took 3 years of data every day about the revenue of the restaurants, but not just the revenue, reservations, everything. I split it in 2 randomly, and then I went to Claude Code, and I said, can you create a predictive algorithm? You do it on this, and you test it on that. And then he started adding data sources. He said, okay, it was okay, but then he said, can you add the weather, because it influences the outcome? Can you add visitors to the town? Can you add reviews on the restaurant? You pick this all up. And then the last thing he said, okay, if I give you the reservations of the next 5 days, he got it to 93% accuracy because he tested it, backward tested. Then he said, can you create a website that I can put in front of 20 selected customers to get their feedback? So it generated a web page with their data. So he said, take the customer A with their data. So everybody loved it. Then he asked me, how long did you think it took me? So I said, well, you're a smart kid, you're a smart team, 6 weeks. Yeah, 6 hours. He said, I did this in 6 hours. I did it, I could do it because the data was there. So it was relatively easy to get the data. So I said, so what you're telling me is you can run an experiment like this every day. I said, you just redefined product management. Because at Philips, this wouldn't take 6 weeks or 6 months. This would take 1.5 years. Just what you did. Just what you did. So imagine what you can do. Imagine what you can create. But you need to have the culture that supports that. You need to dream, you need to experiment, you need to, and yes, you need guardrails. And you mentioned the word Pankaj. You said guardrails. But guardrails help you. So if you cannot define the goal, if you cannot define the guardrails, if you cannot define the challenge, you won't get it. Okay, I was doing a session with 50 CEOs of Dutch hospitals. I asked them a super simple question. What's the goal of the healthcare system? Tell me, what's the goal? And then, somebody started describing the system. I said, no, I don't ask you to describe. What's the goal? What should we measure? And they couldn't give me an answer. They said, we're spending 14% of GDP on healthcare, and you cannot articulate the goal. There are only 80 hospitals in the Netherlands, and 50 of you cannot tell me what the goal is. I said, then you cannot optimize. If you don't give, if you just look at the way AlphaFold was built, and AlphaFold is probably the biggest AI in my world. It allows you to understand proteins, which are the essence of life. And DeepMind is now creating a cellular model as well. But the way they do it, they set the goal very clearly, they identify the constraints, they allow the system to experiment and optimize, and they measure. So the system gets points for every answer it generates. And it's then incented to keep trying until it gets better at what it's doing. That's the principle. I can explain it in 3 sentences. But there's no organization that applies these principles. So they cannot optimize. You cannot optimize a system without a goal. And that should be part of the culture as well. You should be super clear on these things. You should look for the answers in the data. You need to find other data sources. And that's so different from what I grew up with, so different from what I learned when I was sitting in your chair. And then people talk about these transformation projects fail. Why? Because they think it's a project. They think you can set a project with a timeline, you have a project manager, and then they come back and say, we have issues. And I ask, what is the issue? Yeah, we don't have enough rigor in our project management. Or another favorite is, we don't communicate enough. And I said, listen, you can have the best project manager in the world. You can communicate until it comes out of your ears. Your problems are somewhere else. Because you don't understand that this is not a mechanic thing. Transformation is not mechanic. And I think you said it. It's us. It's the leaders. It's people. It's with their fears, with their inspiration, with the stuff that holds them back or the stuff that propels them forward. In my life, I don't know, Madhu, how many projects have I been involved with? Hundreds. I was never, ever technology as the issue. Never. It's us. So, you have to understand, and it's interesting because when I wrote the book, I interviewed the CEO of Lego, and Lego is a famous transformation company because, they were almost dead. Family company, toys, you know Lego. And then the new CEO came in, and he said, we have to go back to our core. Why do we exist? The why. We exist because we believe that you can learn through play. That's why we exist. So we want people to play, and by playing, we want them to acquire skills. It's not about how many colors the little tile has, or And they went, so they basically reduced everything back to the core. Then he said, we need to be much faster and understand what our users really need, because we're super slow, because all these contracts, we have thousands of suppliers. But then he said, what I ultimately want, I want us to become an ecosystem. I want my users to come up with designs. I want my users to participate in how we evolve the company. And it's now one of the most recognizable brands in the world, and they're very successful. But I read this weekend Economist, and I don't know if you read it. I've been subscribing to the Economist since I was in that chair, so I think it's 1980 that I had my first subscription. So I also that one. So after you finish Thinking Fast and Slow and The Innovator's Dilemma, you subscribe to the Economist. But they talked about companies going back to the core. Have you seen the Netflix documentary on Boeing? No? You watched it. It's an amazing, because it's about this. Here's Boeing, pride in engineering, great planes. Then they have a merger with McDonnell, and the MBAs come in. And the MBA says, we have to optimize EBITDA, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. And we do it at the expense of R&D and engineering. And then planes start dropping from the air. And the stock of Boeing crashes, just like those planes. Why? Because they went away from their core. And you know what the new CEO did? He moved the headquarters back to Seattle, and he said, we're going to be an engineering company again. And not, just mechanical and electrical. We're going to use AI and software and sensors and whatever. So, the important thing becomes the ecosystem, the forest the tree lives in. What is your ecosystem? With whom do you engage? And with whom do you want to engage? And what are their real needs? Their stated needs, their unarticulated needs, their emerging needs. That's the only thing you need to do. And once you do that, you can understand what they want and you can start orchestrating for it. And you don't need to do everything yourself. Because there were other peoples in the ecosystem that will give you the battery, that will give you the self-driving capability, that will give you the software for the karaoke cassette that you can put in. And you measure yourself on the value. And if you believe value is price, you're making a big mistake. Value is in the eye of the beholder. And value will differ. If you sell to a customer, the CIO will look at it different than the CFO and the CEO. They all have a different perception of value, and you need to understand that. And only if you can articulate the value, you can identify the price that is fair. So value is a driver. And people talk about it, but I ask people, I work with ventures, and I say, okay, first tell me what the value is. And don't give me hour long. Give me a couple of sentences. How do you measure it? Do you create for each customer a value dashboard? I pay this, I get this. And you hope that this is higher than this, otherwise you have an issue. But sometimes the gap is so big that you say, oh, maybe I can ask a little bit more because the value is very high. So create a value dashboard. How hard is it? Nobody has done it. I said to Philips, you sell an MRI, you give every month, you send them a bill, you send them a value statement. You get it in a bank as well. You have a portfolio, it will tell you, you made this much money and I charge you this. But what's the role you want to play? Because the role you play today is not a given. Because this stuff is dynamic and changes all the time. The opportunities are boundless. What role do you want to play? So, if you embrace all of this, then you'll see that leadership is different. Leadership is first co-sense. What's going on? What do people need? What are my partners looking for? You know, the most valuable company in the Netherlands or in Europe, I know very well because it's a spin out from Philips, is ASML. Without ASML, there is no AI because NVIDIA and TSMC need ASML to print their chips. It's an ecosystem company. 10% they make in-house, 90% they source, but they source it in an ecosystem. They're masters at managing and architecting the ecosystem. That's why the most valuable company in Europe. They co-sense and they co-shape. They work with their partners. They see new opportunities. They are the architects of value, which, by the way, was the tagline from Emphasis in its day. But I still believe in the concept of architecting value and orchestrating value. So you can become ecosystem leaders, but first you have to internalize these 5 big shifts I talked about. Going from scarcity to abundance, think in terms of value networks and ecosystems, abandon the pipeline, go to the platform, think in terms of contribution and not control. What do I contribute as an employee to the company? What does the company contribute to the ecosystem? If I change, let's find the rhythm of change and go in tune with the waves. I'm a surfer. I know that you catch the wave at the wrong time, you almost drown, which happened 3 times to me. But if you ride the wave, it's exhilarating. So here's my favorite quote. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it. Don't just talk about it. Play with it. Experiment with it. Move with it. It's a rhythm. It's an ecosystem. And join the dance. And the dance is a good metaphor because you have to find the rhythm together and you dance together. Now, I'm a bad dancer, but my wife will guide me, and she will guide me in life as well. Thank you very much. And please read the book. You can find it on Flipkart and Amazon. And I never met a human being at Amazon or Flipkart to get my book distributed throughout the world. Think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tas, for your inspiring address. Your insights on digital innovation, leadership, and future-ready enterprises have set the perfect foundation for today's conclave. We'll definitely remember the 5 levels and we'll try to integrate it into our daily life as well as try to become an ecosystem leader someday and make full use of it. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Now we would like to open the floor for some questions.
Thank you, sir, for such an enriching session. So, my name is Adarsh. So, you talked about latent abundance. So, technology creates such a latent abundance. So, why does companies are not able to leverage this abundance? Is this a mindset problem, or is this a is there some?
It's a mindset problem.
And in terms of India, there is such a abundance of labor force, and only 10% are in the organized sector, and the other 90% in the unorganized sector. So this abundance and India private companies and government, they are not able to uh, uh, take advantage of these resources. So how should India go about using this much of resources?
It's a great question, but a big question as well. I was in Chennai, and the Chennai government organized a session with a number of founders of ventures. And they told me that there are 12,000 ventures in Tamil Nadu. And I got exposed to a couple of them. I said, well, here's the problem. You have 12,000 companies that are all trying to build their own little infrastructure, they're all trying to find their channels to the market. And that's a hard slug, Building a good product is difficult, getting it into the market is even more difficult. So I thought, well, look at it as an orchestration problem. How can I orchestrate in such a way that I start clustering companies that are doing similar things, give them a platform that allows them to basically share channels to market, share infrastructure. You know, everybody wants to do AI, everybody wants to do something with data. So can you create an infrastructure? I think, again, I look at what India's capabilities are, and I think they're boundless. And you know, I'm very proud that Nandan Nilekani endorsed my book, by the way. He's the second person in the book. And the reason is I admire him, that despite everything, despite, you know, political fights, he helped India to create Udar and UPI. And now he's out to do the same with AI. Can India create a secure, trusted AI environment? And can we then leverage the data and the resources that we have? Because there's a lot of initiative in India. But I made a joke because I said, well, in India everything flows, but there is no structure. It's the opposite problem we have in the Netherlands. It's all structure and no flow. So you have to find the balance. And definitely India, if you give it structure, then UPI happens. So I think I may be biased in this, but I think it's an orchestration problem. It's not a lack of initiative and yeah, education is still an issue. You guys are lucky, you're privileged, you're sitting here. Actually, yesterday I spent the whole day with underprivileged people, and I met a lot of young girls, 10, 12 years old, that probably will never have the opportunity you have because they don't get access to good education. And I think it's a big shame. So I invested in a Bangalore-based company called Quibi, and they've created a STEM learning platform that allows young kids to play, and by playing, understand physics, math, engineering. So they're basically a STEM learning package. So I think there's plenty of opportunity to expose the country to STEM education. And you've proven already, you know, you go to the US, virtually 70% of the technology companies are run by Indians. So it's absolutely not a lack of talent or initiative. I think it's an orchestration problem. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. It was a great session. But I have a doubt. One, you mentioned that to become a ecosystem leader.
Yeah.
But don't you think becoming an ecosystem leader have a risk of becoming like a risk of strategic brittleness, or like a great example, Microsoft in recent, like they were at the beginning of the 2000, they were more focusing on the Microsoft and Office ecosystems, but they forgot to get more attention towards the internet boom, smartphones, which would create a disruption in PC-centric world now. So, like, that's the
Microsoft has been one of the best ecosystem players in the industry. Why? Because already in the 80s, they nurtured an ecosystem of ISVs, independent software vendors. So they started creating the tools for people to create their own software. Then, of course, they went onto the cloud and they made mistakes. They should never have bought a mobile company, but it doesn't matter. They've seen all the big waves, and they've been on all the big waves, typically later than others, but always as an ecosystem player. So if you look at Azure, their strategy is really an ecosystem strategy. So, and if I say you become an ecosystem leader, I don't say you start competing with Amazon or Apple. You define your ecosystem. I know I'm on the board of a family business. They do about $500 million in revenue, and they do scientific measurement equipment. And they thought of themselves as a device company. And then we started working and said, okay, you use these machines to assess the quality of the material. So you take a sample, you sieve it, you weigh it, you do this, temperature, blah, 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 all these kind of things. I said, go one level higher. It's not just you assessing the quality of a material. So what information do you need? What steps can you do? How can you become the leader in that space? Even if, you know, only 30% or 40% of the devices are yours, you connect these others, and then you create a model of the material that transcends the different device. And then what you do next is you use a robot. Because now people, you know, are taking out of machines, sticking in the next machine, configure the machine, press a button, wait for 2 hours. So you can automate this. So that's your ecosystem. Your ecosystem, and then they started working with universities to do advanced AI on the microscopes. I said, it's no longer about the machine. And this is a small ecosystem. You know, quality control is a small part of an automotive company. But in that ecosystem, you're leading. And you're bringing others in to help you be better at it. So I think everybody can be an ecosystem leader in their own world. Yeah. Or you can choose to be, you know, a commodity player, but then you have to have huge scale and huge efficiency and big channels. That's the harder fight.
Like recently, only Intel faced a huge loss. They were creating a wall, like ecosystem in between, but the CEO given a statement that garden wall become prism for them. So.
Oh, you have 3 models. You have the walled garden, which is Apple. You can have the open field, which was Microsoft. And then, of course, you can have the greenhouse where you try to control everything. So you choose your model. I don't prescribe a model. I just ask you to be conscious about the choices you make.
Understood. Thank you.
Hello, sir. I'm Amrish. So you mentioned AlphaFold, which I remember, if I remember correctly, is in a lot of ways started as an interactive game that was being solved by teenagers, right? So in a lot of ways, because of that interactive game, we have this protein folding.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think that companies should...
By the way, Elon Musk was a game developer as well. Yeah. And Dennis Hasabi, who's the founder of DeepMind, was a game designer as well.
Yeah. So my question is, do you think that companies should start to change the way they do businesses so that like they can create an environment which will enable them to create another AlphaFold? Because that was also a startup. That wasn't a...
and I think once you create AlphaFold, there's a whole world around it. So then you get, you know, life sciences companies that will use these models to find new therapies, or actually there are a lot of therapies on the shelf that may be repurposed for other diseases. That, you know, I don't know if you know Ozempic, but it's the wonder drug for obesity. That was not designed as a wonder drug for obesity. So there are a lot of drugs out there, and that people can then apply these models like AlphaFold. So you get a layered. You know, NVIDIA, everybody thinks it's a chip company. They're a chip company, but they're also creating environments for different. They have created life science, they have created a gaming, they have created an automotive environment. Because which algorithms are you running in the cloud? What are you doing on board? You know, how do you optimize your onboard intelligence? So they've seen that each of these industries requires a platform that allow people to create, you know, great functionality. So you always see these layers. You know, OpenAI will not be just a generic OpenAI company a couple of years from now, that's for sure. And you'll create these layers of specialization on a generic platform. You know, at the bottom is NVIDIA, then you have, you know, the cloud, then you have OpenAI, and then you have a lot of people that build on top of that.
Thank you, sir.
These are all ecosystems. One more question.
One last question.
Good evening, sir. This side.
Oh, where? Oh, there.
So my name is Shishir. In The Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton and Christensen talks about how disruptive innovation often comes through startups instead of incumbent firms.
Yeah.
So why does that happen? IBM suffered the same fate. Netflix did the same with Blockbuster. So why does that happen with incumbent firms?
That was exactly the question that we asked when we started out, because IBM has access to all technology in the world. Why doesn't it happen in IBM? That's because the structure, the leadership doesn't support it unless there is a fundamental change. Now, IBM is on the rise again, but I think it's a sign of weakness if you have to get all your innovation from startups. I think if that's the way you operate, it may be a good model, by the way. You can make money that way. There are plenty of examples. But that means that you fundamentally lack the internal capability to innovate or co-innovate, which I believe is the key to the future. Just doing more of the same is not going to expand anything. You can take a product, take it to more markets, but that ends at some point. So you have to keep innovating. You have to constantly keep innovating. If you always have to go outside and buy a company. Now, I've done in my life probably around 50 acquisitions. It never plays out the way you set out. The synergy plans, it never works. Acquisitions are like transformations. 70% don't work. Why? Because of the same reason. It doesn't fit in the structure, the process, or this. People are not motivated. It's never in the operational layer because that's easy. And then you look at companies that are good at acquisitions. They're extremely clear on how to plug in the acquisition. They almost have a modular organization design, and then you plug it in, and then it works. But that's the exception. So you have to bake it into your design. Okay, one more? You guys are really curious. I like that.
Sir, in the year of abundance, in the other standpoint, like many people, when we have a lot of abundance of wealth, but which is very unevenly distributed, and some parts of the country have scarce of most of the resources, like African countries, when a person from very humble background wants to begin and make a change, like what should that person concentrate on, like when he wants to implement all the principles explained by you, like changing fast and slow, how that person with limited access or low or no resources can work on these principles and make a change?
I think it's the challenge and the opportunity for India. And again, I go back to what UPI did for payments. If on any mobile phone, you can get any question answered that you need. If you're a little farmer with a plot of land and you want to know, before I go to the next town to sell my produce, what's the market price, how long it's going to take me to get it, what's going to cost, what else should I be looking at? This is basically learn to prompt. This is the piece of land I have, this is what I do now, this is the produce I get, I'm here, this location. What would be the best way to optimize my piece of land? So I don't know, but I think there's an opportunity to start doing these things. And then you can ask the question, what else? What else should I be doing given my constraints? that's never the way we develop business. Because right now you just ask the questions, you get prompts, you find ways to tap into that knowledge that you never had. And if you make it super accessible. So I personally believe healthcare is going to change because everybody with a phone should be able to get, triage for free. So the scale at which you can do and the thresholds to get there are getting lower and lower and lower. So how do you combine this technology into something that can democratize what people can do, how they can fulfill their dreams? So then it's just a matter of how big do you dream? And I think it all starts also, I always ask the question, companies I work with say, we have this big ambition, we want to do A, B, and C. And then you find out that essentially they want to do it, but they don't really dare to do it because it's really risky and the organization is not ready. So their dream never becomes reality. I think we're closer to fulfilling dreams than we ever were, but you have to dare. I think that's a good way to end, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions. We, as future working professionals, would very much like to implement these strategies in our working life and succeed ahead. Thank you so much, sir. Now, as we move on to the final segment of today's event, we would now like to invite Aditya Kanal from Batch 31 to take the proceedings forward. Also, we will request Mr. Tas to kindly stay on the stage for a few more minutes for the upcoming prize distribution ceremony.
Okay. Then I'll keep it on.
Thank you, Abhikant and Ipsa. We now arrive at one of the most awaited moments of the day, the prize distribution ceremony. This is the moment where we acknowledge the dedication, celebrate the excellence, and honor the outstanding performance demonstrated by the participants of Stratum 2025. And now, it is my privilege to announce the winners of Stratum 2025. Saurav Kumar, Roshit Lakneni from BA05. May I request Mr. Aaron Tas to present the award to the winners?
Congratulations, sir. Roshit, congratulations. Pardon? You're giving them the wrong book. Here you go.
Now, I request Professor Dr. Roshni James, Director of Zyme Bangalore, along with Professor Madhukumar Sir, to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Aaron Tas to show our gratitude for his valuable insights. Please wait, sir. We are immensely grateful to Mr. Tas for taking time out to share his valuable insights.
Thank you, my pleasure. But you have to buy some books for your students.
Yeah, definitely. Look forward to reading that.
Thank you so much. Grading my clients. Yeah. 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 Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.